All right. Hi, everybody. Let's talk through Chapter 3 of Business and Administrative Communication. That's going to be about building goodwill. We're also going to revisit some of the concepts from Chapter 1, which were about ethics. So first, let's kind of get a working definition of what goodwill is. So goodwill is kind of one of the major foundations of business communication in that it's all about fostering positive relationships with persons or organizations, right? We always want to strive to keep our positive connections, trust, all of those kind of things. So that's what goodwill is all about, right? We're always looking to make sure that we're maintaining that and building it further. And it's about relationship development, essentially. So your book defines several ways to do that. And one of them is about you attitude. You attitude is kind of the concept of connecting with others based on their perspective instead of our own, right? So if you ever like gone on a date or met a new friend or met someone in the world and they just talk about themselves the whole time, they don't ask you anything about yourself, and you feel kind of off put by that, right? That's kind of an example of bad you attitude in an interpersonal relationship. If a social media company was just constantly post about their success, right, and their sales, it would be a little strange, right? You'd be like, this doesn't really have anything to do with me. And that's not good relationship building. We want to focus on the needs of our audience, right? So there's a few different ways to do this that your book breaks down. So the first thing is to talk about the audience and not yourself, right? It's about them. It's not about you in this scenario. So you can kind of see my two examples here. One starts with we and one starts with you, right? So you can kind of notice the difference about the effect that would have on the reader, right? You can now buy tickets versus we're happy to announce. Because again, it's about the impact for the person reading it. Secondly, you want to refer specifically to their order or request when possible. So this was an example from a thank you letter. So you can see that in the second example, we're talking about the person by name and we're talking about their specific donation versus just generically, right? So that kind of makes them feel like, okay, now I have the specifics, right? And you're talking about me. Number 3, we don't want to talk about feelings unless we're congratulating or offering sympathy, right? So we can't assume our client's information, and it's not necessarily important for them to know, right? Unless we're kind of in a celebratory mode or something like that. In positive situations, so when we're giving good news, you can use you more than I, right? So you want to make sure that they're understanding it, how it connects to them. But when we're in a negative situation where maybe somebody paid a bill late or we're taking away a benefit that they had, using you in those situations can kind of come across as like blaming. So we want to avoid that and maybe take out the subject completely. So you can kind of see my example of that here, right? About payment. So in this first example, we have you. In the second one, we take out that subject. You also can consider you attitude beyond the sentence level. So meaning that it's not just about putting the word you in there all the time, but it's about thinking about what the person needs, right? So going back to those basic criteria, just being complete, making sure they have all the information, even if it's information they didn't ask for, helping them understand why it matters and how it affects them. Making sure that the information is organized in a way that they're going to care about, right? What information are they mostly looking for? Do they just want to know about the reward points they're getting, right? Put those at the top and make sure that it's listed easily for them to read it. We also want to think about building goodwill through positive emphasis, right? Avoiding negative words with negative connotations, things like that, and helping people understand the good side of the bad, right? Not outrightly lying to them, right? Being unethical, but also making sure that we're highlighting the benefits and not just, bringing out the negatives. So we kind of want to avoid some common negative words. There's a list in your book, failure, bad, things like this that kind of just have a negative feeling to them, a negative connotation. Hidden negatives, right? So an example here, Domino's pizza now tastes better. Of course, the implication there is that it tasted bad before, right? So in my second example, stop worrying about how your acne-prone skin with ineffective and unhelpful products. Instead, use Zip Be Gone. It kind of implies that our product, Zip Be Gone, is ineffective and unhelpful, right? Could we just call our own product effective and helpful? That would maybe be easier. Things like that. Focus on what they can do, right? Not their limitations. So people get very upset when you're taking things away from them or limiting what they're able to do. So you want to make sure to focus on the good, right? So these are, two things. So we're giving them an alternative, right? And obviously, again, we're not lying to people. We want to give them the information that they need, but also helping them to understand the benefits that are happening and the alternatives that they can do. Justify the negative by giving it a reason. So if you've ever been in a situation where somebody just says you can't do something, you're like, well, why? Right? So in this case, no, you can't purchase a single Hello Kitty keychain. Now let's give a reason, right? So the shipping cost is too high. We only sell them in packs of 10,000. Okay, well, that makes sense. I don't want to buy 10,000, right? But I can understand the shipping cost, right? If we have to bring them over from Japan or something. So that helps the person to kind of understand and logically accept, okay, that's fine. Put the negative information in the middle. If you want to de-emphasize it, you can kind of put it in the middle of the communication, right? Start out with a buffer or something generic, and then kind of put it in the middle and give a goodwill ending. You want to consider the power implications that you're having in your word choices as a way of building goodwill. Whether you're giving someone an order, whether you're just asking them to do something as a question, right? And kind of in between. How does that function among the person that you're talking to, and how is that going to sort of make them feel, right? And motivate them to do the task that you're asking. Another way to build goodwill is by avoiding biased language. So this would be sexist language, racist language, ageist, talking about people with disabilities or diseases in a respectful way. So want to be careful not to gender job titles, right? Like a businessman, mailman, waitress, things like that, and trying to make them gender neutral. You also want to be sure to use courtesy titles as well, and knowing what gender pronouns people prefer or possibly eliminating them when it's available to you to do that. We want to avoid racist language in any way. Usually it's not totally necessary to give someone's race in content unless it's relevant to the story, but make sure you understand what the preferred terms are, and things of that nature. Misunderstandings can happen. As well as talking about people with diseases and disabilities. We want to use people first language, right? So instead of calling a person a cancer patient, we want to say it's a person that's being treated for cancer. You also want to make sure you're choosing bias-free imagery. So your visual communication sends just as much of a message as the text that you do. So if you're including pictures, photographs, diagrams, things like that, is there anything that can be considered biased within that? Whether the print is very small and it's too difficult to read for somebody who has a difficult time reading, or it only depicts people of a certain race or a certain age, right? You want to kind of make sure that you're being inclusive when possible. And then lastly, as part of this section, I want to talk briefly about business ethics. So we largely know the definition of ethics, and these are moral principles, right, that we have that are governing a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So in a business situation, of course, that's really about the moral principles that are governing an organization's behavior, right? And so a lot of times companies have their own set of guidelines, ethical guidelines that they adhere to, or like an industry standard for that industry matters, right? But of course, things go awry a lot of the time. So we know of many cases, and part of your discussion board is about businesses who have kind of gotten into trouble because of their communication, right? Ethics can go poorly as a result of poor communication. And there's many, many consequences of that, of course, destroying goodwill with customers or potential customers, fines, jail time, lack of trust, losing money, all of those kind of things. So it can be a very negative situation and can go down quickly. So these are a few sample ethical issues. This is from exercise 110 in your book. If you want to take a look at these and kind of deciding, okay, what's okay versus not, and where is that line drawn, right? For you personally, there's not a right or wrong answer to these necessarily, but you have to ask yourself, where am I comfortable versus not? When we're thinking about the way ethical issues connect with business communication, there's a few different ways that this can sort of go wrong, right? And so it's important to be ethical in giving all of the information, right? Leaving stuff out is not an ethical choice that you know that they might need to know, right? Am I expressing in a way that they will understand? Am I using language? We've all heard of cases where people use like complicated legalese that is not easily understood. Is it in a format that my audience can grasp quickly? Is it in, like a terms and conditions tiny page that's very difficult to read and understand? Do I have information for all segments of my audience if I know that they're, say, speaking a different language, or they aren't able to access things online? Then we're not giving them all the information. Am I taking information from other sources accurately, right? Am I pulling little pieces of data and making them misleading? Am I acknowledging the sources where they came from? Am I giving the whole story, right? All of those little things can lead up to some ethical problems. So we have ethics in the way that we convey the message, whether it's clear, whether we have clear graphics. So that's one way that they can go wrong, as well as in the quality of the message. Is it logical? Is it emotionally manipulative? Does it use good sources? Is it honest? Things like that. And then finally, the larger organizational context of the message, right? What does it say about the organization itself, right? How does the organization treat its employees? Is it supporting their efforts, right? What are they doing on a broader scale to be ethical or not? So ethics is a huge area of interest. And I think one of the best ways to understand it is to look at the cases, right, where it has gone poorly. So that's something that we will be exploring further on. So that's kind of a look at Chapter 3, Goodwill and Ethics. And we will carry on from here. Thank you.